Hey, what's going on? This is the Saturday Down South podcast. Subscribe to Saturday Down South on YouTube. I'm Connor O'Gara. Will, we have a national championship, and by God, the Indiana Hoosiers are in it.
Man, I'm so happy for you. We were joking off air about, you were such a lad that you predicted my team would win a championship. And I spent all year praying that my team would make the national championship. And one of us was right. One of our teams is in the national championship.
Real talk here. Fully real, I'm going to be as transparent as humanly possible during this entire thing. We're just going to recap the semifinal games. We're recording this 15 minutes after the Peach Bowl ended. I would hope by now Kurt Signetti has cracked a beer. I assume that he has since done that.
He smiled for the first time. He was more fired up than Mendoza, dude.
He did. We had some Kurt Signetti smiles. We had a couple of outbursts late. Full disclosure here. I never thought there would be any world in which I would come on these airwaves and talk about my school being left while every other school is not playing football anymore. And I'm very aware of that. And I do not mean to rub salt in the wound. So do not take anything I say as, hey, my team is better than yours. No, it is not. But on this year, I think my team is better than everybody's. And it's
They're
weird.
a wagon, dude. They're a wagon. They're not just beating teams. They're taking their souls. They're curb stomping them.
It's to the point where, and we'll start with Ole Miss first, but even the very first, you can't even miss a play of a game, or else you're going to miss them taking the lead, because we were just getting back. Lauren's like, let's go to Brewster's, let's get some ice cream beforehand, and then we'll come back and we'll do bedtime stuff with Clara. So we do that, and of course Clara's hopped up on chocolate peanut butter with Buckeyes, the single greatest ice cream ever created, and she's running around the house and stuff, and we're like trying to get her into pajamas and stuff like that. And as that's happening, the first play is happening, and I'm like, Lauren, pick six already. And she's like, wait a minute, what? What? And she can hear the TV going because it's an IU home game in Atlanta. And that's how crazy this was. Yes, we will get to all that. Plenty of takeaways from IU and Oregon, a game that was never close. But let's start with the Fiesta Bowl. Let's do right by the people, the people of Ole Miss that I hope by the time that you're listening to this, you have some peace. I hope that by now you have been able to come to grips with how historic, how memorable of a run this was, the greatest Ole Miss team ever. But yes.
And you're still hungover. So that's the thing. If you listen to us tomorrow, going out there, having all the fun that you guys had. I've seen so many clips from Ole Miss fans. Y'all had a good time no matter what.
That was never going to be in doubt. Never going to be a doubt. Win, lose, or draw. I mean, come on. Ole Miss fans were always going to bring it in that sort of way. And I guess if you're listening to this on Sunday and you're still hungover from Thursday, that's a borderline bender at that point. But it's, if you're in college, that's just a weekend, especially in Oxford. So I won't shame you for that. But yes, Will, the U is back in a national championship for the first time in 23 years. A thrilling, epic playoff games, one of the best playoff games that we've seen in these 12 years of the system. One of probably the maybe three best semifinal games. I mean, it was like,
and we just said this about Ole Miss with Georgia. I mean,
right?
It's like, we go into the playoff looking at Georgia, looking at Ohio State, and we get to the end and we're going, oh my God, Ole Miss, Indiana, must see TV. Because again, the way that these teams are winning isn't normal. Like the way that Ole Miss beat Georgia, the way that Ole Miss went back and forth with Miami was gripping television.
It was. And until the very last play, it was gripping television. But yeah, this game saw Carson Beck, the underdog Carson Beck, as we're apparently being told. He and his $4 million paycheck waltzed into the end zone, had this unforgettable moment, the redemption arc. First rushing touchdown since week 3 for Carson Beck. Came with 18 seconds left to be able to take the lead. Ultimately sends Miami to a national championship. Amazing that Trinidad had this moment in which he almost went full Mahomes against the Bills in the playoffs. And the fact that he even gave Ole Miss a chance with 75 yards to go in 18 seconds. I mean, it just speaks to how incredible he was down to the very last second. Amazingly dumb that we did not get an untimed down from what would have been the 20-yard line to end it. That's the only way that this game could have been any more dramatic, any more epic. But hey, Miami finally got a little payback for the no call, or I guess payback from the late DPI 23 years ago in the Fiesta Bowl against Ohio State. Even though it was actually the right call, it was just way too late. People kind of forget that and they sweep that under the rug. And Miami fans are like, "Oh, see, we were owed one." That's not really how it works. We have tons to get to here. Tons to get to. Can we get the non DPI call out of the way first? Can we get that out of the way?
Yeah, and I think for this one, I'm always Mr. Official, but I'm turning over a new leaf here. I'll say that was frustrating. I'm going to talk about targeting really quickly as well. There were those two kind of dueling targeting calls. I've decided what I want to do with my life. I want to be a rules expert on a broadcast. Because that gentleman got up there and said, "Hey, that's clearly targeting," when it was on Ole Miss, and the official comes out and does, "That's clearly not targeting." They go back to him and he goes, rules official goes, "You know what? Actually, I see his point. It's not targeting. Back to you." And that's his whole job. And I would love that.
It's modern day weatherman. It's what it is. It's modern day weatherman. Gene Steratore is an auto mute when he comes on TV during a game. And thankfully, it's not at the college level. It's only the NFL. And he just comes in like he already knows exactly what's about to happen. And he just agrees with the official every single time. And then I feel like he gets it wrong at least half the time. And I'm like, thanks, Gene, for nothing. Absolutely nothing. Yeah. And Matt Austin on the defensive pass interference said that he didn't think, or it wasn't Matt. It wasn't Matt Austin. Let me take that back. It was, I'm blanking on the name of the other rules official, but it's the other one that's usually with Fowler and Herbie, and comes in and says like, I think there was hand combat or whatever the case. But for those who haven't watched what we're talking about, or you haven't seen this 1,000 times, maybe you flipped off the game the second that this went final and you didn't even look at the second angle, whatever. Last play of the game, Ole Miss down 4. Trinidad lets go of what I would call a short Hail Mary. Like we need a name for that because it's not really a Hail Mary. I think Hail Mary is like got to be from at least the 45 or the 50. And
it wasn't a prayer. It was like a blessing.
Yeah.
I was like, I really hope this guy catches this.
Yeah, like this would be really cool if you caught it. But it's not a total miracle. I mean, it would have been a really, really difficult play to come down with. But Stribling is hand fighting with the Miami corner the whole way down, and not really any debate about that. And as the ball nears, it looks like a jersey tug. It definitely looks like a jersey tug, and he's bringing him down. Stribling, Chambliss, Golding, all of them are motioning for a flag that just never comes. I waited the full 10 seconds to be like, college football gods, how sick are you? You want to pull this out 10 seconds late and do it all over again against Miami?
And nobody was madder than Lane Kiffin, who I believe this cost him like $750,000, who immediately emphatically
it's 250, was it? We're still at 250. If it's 250,
I think I was totaling them. There you go.
Yeah,
it was at 250, but he emphatically tweeted, that was pass interference. So even Lane Kiffin was on their side. I definitely feel that.
Yeah. Whatever the case, here's my take, and I'm curious if you have the same one. Do I think it was defensive pass interference? Yes. Would Trinidad have been the perfect quarterback to have what would have been an untimed down from the 20 to potentially get to a national championship? Yes. Do I think that play was the reason that Ole Miss lost? No. All three of those things.
100% in agreement. And I would just kind of move off of that, would say, Connor, have you ever seen a game where the football gods are clearly on one team's side, and yet they lose the time of possession this badly? Because it felt like Miami dropped 4 picks. It felt like Miami, they missed one of their 2 field goals. It felt like Miami should have been up by 2 or 3 touchdowns. And it felt like one of those Trinidad drives that we've seen. And again, their kicker is so amazing, almost automatic again. He had 2 doinks. He was 1 for 2 on doinks for Ole Miss's kicker. And so it was weird because it felt like Ole Miss had so few opportunities, but they capitalized on them. And Miami had so many opportunities and they didn't, but you just kind of kept feeling like that was going to reset to 0.
Yeah, it was the Mario Kart scenario. Here, Ole Miss, here's your lightning, here's your star. boom, catch up, make this a lot closer than it probably should be right now, even though you're kind of getting smoked. That's just kind of the way that the game works. It did feel a little bit like the college ball gods were doing that. It's not to say that everything was being gifted to Ole Miss. Lord knows they created a lot of those opportunities themselves. But I mean, this second half was crazy. 4 lead changes in the second half. And this game felt up until the very end, like Trinidad was just going to find a way. Like Trinidad was going to do whatever he could to will this team to victory. And if he did, it would have been even more improbable than the Sugar Bowl because he didn't have Kewan Lacey for roughly half of this game. When he ran in that 73-yard score, I thought that was going to wake up the Ole Miss ground game. And when he's kind of pulling up, and slowing down with 20 yards to go, I'm like, what's he doing? Does he realize he's got 20 yards left? And apparently, dealing with a little bit of a hamstring injury that was slowing him down there at the end, and gritty for him just to show up at any point in the second half, because a lot of people are pointing out the longer you wait with a hamstring injury, the worse it's going to be, the less likely you are to be able to all of a sudden feel good enough to be able to play. And for him to even end up with double-digit touches in this one, I was like, oh man, that was gritty as hell for him to be able to do that. So you're dealing with that if you're Chambliss. But at what point it's like 20 consecutive pass attempts that they had, or at least 20 consecutive called passes. And Chambliss was pressured a career high 17 times in this one. And Miami got home once. Remember, what was the over-under that I set? 1 Miami sack of Trinidad Chambliss. And what did they get? 1. That's it. They couldn't get to him. He was incredible. They couldn't pick him off for whatever reason. Like you said, all those interceptions that he was throwing, he had 3 turnover-worthy plays. It felt like he probably had 6 or 7. I'd have to double-check the
If
metrics.
you count every defender that one pass bounced off of, it was like 7.
Oh, my God. Here, you want this? You want this? No. All right. It's kind of like when your kids are fighting, and I don't have multiple kids. I only have the one. But like if multiple kids are fighting over a toy and you're like, you know what? Nobody gets this. Then you just take it back.
Carson Beck scored. Where are these linebackers from Louisville? I was throwing the deer them, and they were picking it off. Why can't you guys do this?
Seriously, my goodness gracious. Yeah, Ole Miss couldn't get into a rhythm for a good chunk of this game, in part because of that Miami pass rush against what became a one-dimensional Ole Miss offense. But the Ole Miss defense couldn't get off the field. The most frustrating stat for Ole Miss in this one was that Ole Miss was 2 for 10 on third down, and Miami had 11 third down conversions, and then they were 2 for 2 on fourth down. It felt like that's where basically all of Ole Miss's 17 missed tackles in this game came from, was those key third down spots. Roughly 4 on that unreal play by Malachi Toney, who was dead to rights from Santarin Perkins. Santarin Perkins has him around the ankle, and if he just holds him there, it's a field goal attempt with a shaky kicker. Instead, he picks up the first down. Miami scores a touchdown there. And that, to me, felt like where this game was won and lost more so than the missed DPI call.
Yeah, I mean, there were a billion different places, and it's funny because, the game starts off, right? And we kind of, not disagree with this, we kind of different takes on it with Lacey and how healthy he was. And, 3 carries into the game, he's like grabbing his shoulder, he's bouncing off his own guys. I'm like, this looks like shades of Tennessee when they needed the running back last year, and he wasn't
Dylan
quite
Sampson,
right.
and he just couldn't go. Yeah.
And I remember because I had picked them in that game, and I thought, how important is this running back? And I saw it and I went, wow, I feel, like he actually is hurt. And then what? Let's see, 6 plays later, he is just waltzing into the end zone. Not waltzing, he's still kind of struggling, but he's clearly breaking away. And that just goes to show what a gamer Lacey is. But for me, man, I do think it comes down to that last drive with Carson Beck versus, the Pete Golding defense. I think that the decision not to send extra pressure is a really big one. And I know that, you really shouldn't respect Carson Beck's legs, to your point that he hadn't scored since week 3. But you just can't let that happen. And I think when they've been such an aggressive defense over the course of the year, and when they've been a defense that, and I hadn't picked up on this until the broadcast said it, but that they're one of the top teams in America for missed tackles. And it felt like Miami's game plan was specifically to capitalize on poor targeting. I mean, I've never seen more successful tunnel screens. I feel like every time I see a tunnel screen, I'm like, oh man, so all it takes is a guy kind of stumbling and it's a goofy play.
And with Toney, forget about it.
They would run these tunnel screens to perfection, and you could kind of see they were like, wait, they don't want to tackle Fletcher. We get our guys out in space, and we make them one-on-one, and that's what we're trying to do. So it was kind of a twofold thing. So I say that to say, from the defensive side of it for Ole Miss, it's like you almost kind of want to live and die swinging. in my mind. If you're a defensive head coach, if you're Pete Golding, I would say you want to trust your guys to get after the quarterback and not just hang back in coverage and let him kind of pick you apart. Even though Carson Beck has shown us previously he's a guy who's turnover prone, he's turned over a new leaf too. And he can be this game manager who can call his own number at the end of a big moment like that.
The only counterpoint I have to that is that they were on the field. What was that? The 88th play that Carson Beck had that 3-yard touchdown run. That defense by the end of that game on fumes.
Gassed. Oh, yeah.
And you could say, well, if they had pressured more, maybe they would have been able to get off the field earlier. They did get some key stops, and they ended up sacking him 4 times. And he saw plenty of pressure. And so they did do that. But yeah, I mean, I think there would be some of those plays on those key down and distances that they probably want back. I mean, Miami had, as Jordan Rodgers reminded me, they had 4 different drives of 13 plays. And that's crazy to think that Ole Miss even had a chance when Miami was doing that, and to think that they could have made one of those stops down the stretch and been able to preserve the lead, or at least force overtime, or give it to Trinidad with the chance to go have a game-winning drive. To me, that's insane. And they held on as long as they possibly could until the dam ultimately broke. But yeah, I mean, I think it would have been a minor miracle if Ole Miss had won despite all of those things. I really do. Or it would have just been a sign that Chambliss was superhuman. Maybe both.
Yeah. I mean, I think, coming away from this, I gained a ton of respect for the Miami defense in that I saw what it took to be successful against them, right? Because I talked about it in the preview. Oh, they should get the turnover out of the way. And the thing about Trinidad and the way this game went, right? Like, you can look at what your eyes told you with the turnover worthy plays, or you can look at the box score where they weren't there.
No
But in
turnovers.
reality, they didn't happen, right? And so that being said, he was testing this defense. If you're a quarterback and you kind of throw it right to a defender, it makes you kind of turtle. He didn't do that. And so I think that offensively versus the Miami defense, given that, Lacey was hurt. Okay, Trinidad and Lacey combined for still almost 400 yards on only 11 carries by Lacey. Obviously, he had the long run. But what you wanted to see offensively, I think, was there. To be honest with you, I was a little bit shocked defensively that Miami was able to impose their will, because I didn't think that Mario Cristobal had the boldness, I'll say it, G related, to stick with the run game as long as he did.
What's amazing too about, you talk about like being able to see those passes go right into the arms of Miami defenders and then still want to take shots. I don't know if you saw, and I can't remember who had the all 22 angle of this, but I saw the clip of the go-ahead touchdown where Chambliss finds Daquan Wright and he sees Keontae Scott and he's motioning him like, bring it. I don't care. I know who you are. I've watched film on you. I know that you're going to drop the hammer because that's what you do coming in from the second level. It's what you've done all playoff. I don't care. I'm still going to talk trash to you. And Trinidad was talking that smack this whole game. And I think he needed to get himself to that place to get Ole Miss in that place. And man, if he had won that game, I think it would have been I think it would have won up the Sugar Bowl. I really do. Even if statistically it wouldn't have been as impressive, I think the context of all of that and all of what we're talking about with this Miami defense, the way that they were still able to get after him, to me, it would have been incredible. And I found myself wondering this, Will, and I don't know if you asked the same question, but how many seconds do you think he needed on that last drive? Because I think 28 seconds, if instead of 18, I think he wins that game.
I mean, it's nuts, right? Like, where I joked about some athlete, I think it was John Smoltz, where it's like, if a guy had the force, but we didn't know it, like Trinidad Chambliss is right there because he just did this against Georgia, right? And we talked about, you said, when did you know? It's like, when I looked at the clock and I saw that Trinidad Chambliss had the ability to come back, it was just not enough, time. But to your point, if we're I guess calling the game fairly, maybe he did. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of the thing, is if a flag comes, he might have had enough time. We'll never know. I think whatever time you give Trinidad Chambliss, unlike almost any player in college football that I've seen, you trust him with it. Bryce Young was a little bit like that. We've seen a couple of guys like that here or there, where it's like if he had 10 seconds, he would have found a way to get a guy out of bounds real quick, set something up.
Chambliss was the guy that you would have wanted in that situation. We talked about it coming into the playoff. The quarterbacks that you would want, 2 minutes, you're down 4, need a touchdown, season's on the line. But Carson Beck is going to be the one that gets remembered for having that play. And, he gets all the praise for those drives in the fourth quarter, man. That last drive, he was excellent. He was on time, and he had like a couple of little blips in which you thought to yourself, is he about to fumble this way, or is he going to throw a Marcel Reed like pick into the end zone or something like that? And nobody would have been surprised, but he kept making smart decisions. And I know that the way that the Ole Miss defense broke down on that game-winning touchdown run makes it look like they just forgot about him in man coverage, which in essence they did. But it still takes him going through all of his progressions and not panicking in that spot. And I want to give Carson Beck credit for that, because that's a guy that does not default to his legs. Now, he has in the playoff. Like, if you look at the scramble numbers, he had 29 scramble yards in this game, 3 of which obviously on that touchdown run. And his previous season high was 28 scramble yards, and it was the Ohio State game. Before that, 0 games with 10 scramble yards. The last time he had that many scramble yards was the Georgia Tech game last year. So this was not a part of their offense. And Shannon Dawson, who I don't know if he was hearing Miami fans yelling at him, why are you getting cute? Why are you running flea flickers? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? His game planning on those last couple drives worked out well. And even in spots where it felt like, man, they should probably just be running it with Mark Fletcher. They still have plenty of time to be able to do that. He put faith in Carson Beck. And feel how you will about Carson Beck, and you could think that he's, the inferior quarterback in this game. I still would have taken Trinidad if I'm just picking between the two. But that was a legacy moment for him. And he deserves a lot of credit for being able to step up down the stretch and give Miami a moment it hasn't had in over 2 decades.
Yeah, and it's crazy because again, you can look at your eyes, look at the box score. By the box score, these quarterbacks had very similar days, right? But I think that when you factor in how scary the Miami defense had been all day and how susceptible the Ole Miss defense had been, that's why we're looking at it going, yeah, I think Trinidad clearly had a better day. But in that moment, I think it's so fascinating that Carson Beck decided to again make the safe play, right? You saw big silent X Xavier Harris 51 kind of tripped and fell down in the middle of that play. You see pressure.
He thought the play was over. He turned around and looked as if like he had already thrown the ball. And I didn't see that in real time, and I didn't see that until the replay. And I did kind of wonder if he just gets up, is he able to actually beat him to the edge? And is that kind of the what if sliding doors moment for the Ole Miss defense? Probably not. Probably
Look,
not.
I love a
getting
big
there.
boy. I am a big boy. But
Probably
once
not
you get
getting
a
there.
certain amount of object, Newton's laws, right? Like once he
Yeah.
was stopped, he needed to get back in motion. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So Beck sees the pressure off the right edge, so he starts to avoid that. He looks forward, big boy on the ground. He goes, well, there's free real estate right there. So it's actually such a dynamic bang, bang, I'm in versus I'm going to predetermine this. If this doesn't go my way, it's going to scramble. I think he just saw a golden opportunity. And instead of being Marcel Reed and going, let me check this at the end zone and see what happens, he goes, what happens if I did do this? I could do this. No one's stopping me. What could happen? And I think that just goes to show his progression as a player.
Ole Miss didn't have a spy on that play either, did they? I know they had spies at different points. You don't think spy usually on like the 3-yard line in that spot. I don't think they had a spy on that play, and in man coverage, yeah, that's what you're supposed to do. And he did it. Deserves a lot of credit. He really does. The irony in all of this, Will, is that at no point in this game did I personally say, what is the Ole Miss coaching staff doing? Despite all the turmoil of all this entire situation, it's weird that John David Baker and Frank Wilson were on the sideline for Ole Miss.
They got extra coaches. That's the thing. That was lanyap coaches, we say in Louisiana.
Well, I mean, you're without your wide receivers and tight ends coach, so they're replacing those spots. But I get what you're saying. Those guys were there for next year, and here they are. And Pete Golding's like, "Yep, we're going to have you on the sideline, and you're going to be a part of this and all that." Wild, just weird. But at no point in this game did I feel like, man, the coaching staff's just really letting them down. I thought their game plan from an offensive standpoint, it was hard to judge early on, because if you're only getting like 8 plays and you're sitting there in the middle of the second quarter, I can't really sit there and judge your opening script or how that looks and whatnot. And when, Trinidad only took 1 sack the entire game, it wasn't like you were having massive protection issues or something like that. And he certainly was a big part of making sure that didn't happen. And he wasn't swallowed whole by this Miami defense. But, meanwhile with Miami, some of the decisions that Shannon Dawson was making before those last couple drives, they were dumbfounding. And if Miami had lost this game, you mentioned this earlier, it would have only had itself to blame when it clearly had the physical advantage. But Ole Miss lost this game from a lack of physical execution. It wasn't mental, in my opinion. And it wasn't anything that suggested that this coaching staff was overwhelmed or the lights were too bright on this stage.
I fully agree. And the thing about that is they kept pretty much the entire defensive staff. And I feel like the offensive staff has been lights out in these 3 playoff games, right? And just a quick little thing here, I don't think there are two more different running back coaches than Frank Wilson and Kevin Smith. And you could literally see that in the fact that Lacey was still playing, being hurt, because he is a old school. He has the NCAA record for the most carries in a season at UCF.
Kevin Smith, UCF, great.
Yes. Yes. And so he will run a running back into the ground. And the fact that he is like, hey, you still got it, Lacey, you're still the best chance. I'm imagining that Frank Wilson was still scolding him for the fumble last game. And so I feel like these are 2 very different coaches. It's going to be a very different offense. But if we were to say, oh, it's chaos, the coaching staff, it would be fumbles. It would be protection issues. It would be offensive miscues. That's not what happened. What we saw, like I said, was some missed tackles, some stuff on the defensive side of the ball. So I think that Ole Miss can say, again, we capitalize on the best of our opportunities. I think that no one, even Miami fans, were prepared for them to lean on Ole Miss the way that they did. And when you only have X amount of possession because your defense won't get off the field, you can only do so much offensively. So again, very close game. Could have gone either way. It's not like one of the teams was clearly superior. I think that Ole Miss can be fired up about the season and fired up for things to come. So it's not like it was a big, whatever moment. I think it's incredible. I mean, like this is a story that these people who were here will be able to tell their grandkids about one day about, hey, remember when all this drama happened? We still had one of the best, Ole Miss teams in history.
Best team ever. Let's just best team ever. No debate whatsoever. In my opinion, you could tell me pre-integration stuff matters more to you. If that's you, that's fine. Best team ever, man. Best team ever. You won 13 games. You had a lead with 19 seconds left to get to the national championship in the 12-team playoff era when your coach left you. Best team ever.
Hey, Cotter, imagine one of those pre-integration teams blocking Ruben Bain.
My God.
That guy, 3 guys on defense. It was better.
That guy didn't hear his name called on the broadcast. He ends up still leading them. He had 6 pressures on a game. Still did some things in the run game and was an effective player, in my opinion.
But this is a man who blocked kicks in other games. Like, he was a complete stat stuffer in other games. So they did what they needed to do, He
literally said afterwards, we didn't really play our brand of football. That wasn't that. They had 1 TFL. Their only TFL was on the opening possession, and they forced that intentional grounding call on Trinidad. And they had this mantra about them of, what is it? Oh, I can't remember what it stands for. Like, it's ESV. It's like execution, speed, violence, something like that. I remember Brandon Marcel wrote something about this. They did not execute their game plan. And I think you could make a really good argument that Ole Miss and what it was doing schematically, the way that they're wired, obviously when you have a quarterback that does the things that Trinidad does, it just changes who you are. But like Miami, and Eric McLean was talking about this too, about how like Miami probably played a C+ game. Now he said, or maybe a C- game. And he said Ole Miss played an A+ game, which I'm like, that's not true. You can't miss 17 tackles until 2 doinked kicks. We're talking A+ game. You were without your running back for half the game. You went 2 for 10 on 3rd down. You allowed 13 conversions on 3rd and 4th. That was not an A+ game from Ole Miss. It was not the best game that Ole Miss has played this year. But at the same time, I did not think it was from these coaching issues where it was all of a sudden just so evident that they were just a team in turmoil. You would have had no idea whatsoever, other than the fact, and I stand by this. This is going to sound disrespectful. It's not, Ole Miss fans. It's not. And your guy can go into this. Has a coach ever given off less head coach energy than what Pete Golding gives off? I don't think so. I don't think so.
Right?
No. He is a position coach, like by nature. But when you see him in the huddle and you see him speaking to guys in between plays and stuff like that, I realize like Coach O, Mario Cristobal, they're both Miami guys. They're wired different in different sort of ways, but they give off that same sort of vibe of intensity. We're going to come to the sideline, something like that. You see him stomping around, you kind of get it. Pete Golding does not give off head coach energy, but what he has done so far is make me totally back off of that take. If I come to the table with that take for this 2026 Ole Miss team that we're going to talk about in a second here, shame on me, because everything that we saw from these 3 playoff games suggests that guy has no problem being on that stage, and there is a large divide between the lack of head coach energy that he gives off and the actual energy that he has been able to have this team embrace, and the way that this has all galvanized them.
Let me just get the most random 1-star review of all time. As University of Oklahoma fans would tell you, winning in the regular season and winning in the playoff are 2 different sports. So I would say that one doesn't really have a ton to do with the other, because we've seen some great Oklahoma teams. We've seen some great Notre Dame teams, under Brian Kelly, that we go, we expect all these things. The thing about being a head coach in the regular season is about not getting too high, not getting too low. Again, Coach O did that for a year, right? But how can you sustain it? So can Pete Golding give you elite interim energy? I know he's not interim. Can he give you elite energy? Can he get the boys fired up? Was he a better head coach for this run than Lane Kiffin? Probably.
Right man, right spot.
Probably.
Right man, right spot. And that's fine. And this can be its own thing. This could forever be this chapter of Ole Miss football, and we can treat everything else with different contexts, and I think that's perfectly fine.
And you know what the beautiful thing about it is too? I mean, again, I'm talking about Coach O because we're talking about guys, position coaches, like they just don't give up the vibe. So it's not an LSU thing. If you're talking about guys in SEC history that have been similar, like, run through a wall type of guys. But you wouldn't say that LSU made a mistake in keeping Coach O because they got the championship out of it. I think that this in itself legitimizes the Pete Golding hire. That whatever happens next year, the year after, because at the end of the day, your goal this season was to compete this season. So you did that. You kept the continuity. Whatever happens, we got the donors in line. We got the fan base together. We proved that Ole Miss belonged in these situations. They slayed the dragon in Georgia. Had the rematch there. And so even if it's the same thing as Coach O, you have the best team ever. And 2 years later, it's not working out. They still have the infrastructure in place to prove they belong. And that's what this was about. Being told you're not good enough, you don't belong here, and showing that you do.
Let's talk about the future of this team, because we found out on Friday that the Trinidad Chambliss waiver was rejected by the NCAA. Thomas Mars is going to try and go through Mississippi court and try and see if there's another way in which this can be appealed, and he can still ultimately come back and play at Ole Miss. We know that the deal was agreed upon for him, if he is going to play in college football in 2026, that it will be at Ole Miss. TBD on all of that. I want him back in college football, obviously, but you can't tell me that guy's not ready for the NFL, because he is. He's absolutely ready for the NFL. I would take him over Ty Simpson, both one-year starters at this level. But Chambliss wasn't sitting on the bench for 3 years like Simpson was at Alabama. He at least, take it for what it is. It's Division II. It's a year of reps at a higher level than high school football. 16 starts in D2, 12 for this Ole Miss team. But he handles pressure so well, and that's what makes me think that I would feel more comfortable with him than Ty Simpson. Maybe I'll regret those words, but he fits balls into tight windows. He keeps his eyes downfield. He throws with great anticipation. You can use him in the quarterback run game. Maybe you could say he's a bit undersized. Ty Simpson's got better size for sure. And I don't mean to just make this like Ty Simpson versus Chambliss. It's just kind of where they're going to be tiered probably if ultimately he comes out. But like when you're listed at 6 foot, 200 pounds, that usually means you're like 5'10 and a half, 5'11, 190. So TBD on all that stuff. Worth noting, he did have 15 batted passes. I went back and looked that up because I was like, he does kind of have some of those come up. Fourth most in FBS. Gunnar Stockton led the country with 17 of those. But you can sell yourself on all of that changing because he's shown that he can make these throws on the run. And you don't necessarily have to treat him like Kyler Murray because he's a different player, but you can get him outside of the pocket and doing some different things with them. Offensive coordinators in this day and age should be able to do that in the NFL. He's going to be 24 by the time next football season starts. So maturity is not going to be a question. He checks all those boxes. I don't know. I think he's ready for the NFL, and I'm usually not that guy that's saying that after these one-year starters come in, but I'm looking at his body of work going, I don't know why you would want to go through this emotional roller coaster in the courts of getting this, trying to fight this and really trying to get this extra year. I understand if you love your college experience, if you personally feel like you are absolutely not ready for the NFL, then that's you. But what I've seen with my eyes tell me that would translate, and I would be really high on him at the next level.
Yeah, it's fun. The reason why I was laughing earlier was, the knock would be, oh, D2 guy, he took over as a backup, but he ended up playing an entire season's worth of games as a starter because they played the extra games, through the playoffs. So
Yeah, I guess the
it's
12 starts
yeah,
ultimately.
exactly. 12 starts. So at the end of the day, there are plenty of quarterbacks who, get 13 starts with a bowl game because it's just your standard plan. And there are some guys who don't make a bowl game. So that being said, um, I'm not too worried about that. I'm right there with you. It's like, what was your goal when you came to Oxford, right? Your goal was to compete for a national championship. Well, win the starting job, probably, right? Within yourself, compete for a national championship. You did that. Okay. Get an avenue to the NFL draft, really make some money. Well, you did all of that. So I don't really see what, from his standpoint, coming back does for him other than let people pick him apart as, to your point, maybe a little bit smaller of a guy. But if you look at where the modern NFL is going, and me and my buddies were having this conversation the other day where it's like, it's weird that a lot of NFL records, like passing records, feel like they're just not going to get broken. Like kind of the 2010s golden quarterback era I always talk about. And it feels like part of the reason for that is every scheme is starting to get a guy who is maybe not a dual threat, true like Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, but a guy who uses his legs as a weapon. And I think that Trinidad is able to do that in a way that should make NFL offensive coordinators salivate. You see that in the Ben Johnson offense in Chicago, right? Where Caleb Williams isn't Lamar Jackson, but he can make things happen with his feet. And I think that's exactly what a modern quote unquote pocket passer looks like, where and I swear to you, I'm not comparing him to Pat Mahomes, but that created this archetype of what NFL guys look at, where it's, hey, you can kind of throw off platform, you got these different arm angles, you never die on a play. I think that Georgia highlight, if I was a GM, would just make me like salivate and go, hey, as a coach, you're probably furious, but as a GM, you're going, oh my God, this guy, we're never out of it with this guy. And you can't qualify that.
So let's play this scenario out just in case it does happen. Let's say ultimately he's able to find a way back into college football and he does decide to stay at Ole Miss. If he somehow gets this overturned, Ole Miss deserves to start as a top 5 team. I think they do. You would return the best 1-2 punch in college football with Chambliss and Lacey. You would have your defensive leader coming back in Pete Golding, who, look, obviously he's first time head coach, and there'd be a lot of skepticism there, but you also beat Kirby Smart when Kirby Smart had 3 weeks of prep to be able to prep. Ole
I'm
Miss
glad
is,
you brought this up, Connor, because yeah, that's a little bit of a take, but I'm going to ask you another one. Should they be the highest ranked SEC team next year?
I think if Chambliss comes back, yes, I do. Now, again, this looks now less likely than it did 24 hours ago. So maybe this won't even matter. But yes, I legitimately do, because they're already active in the portal. They're already going after guys that I think a lot of people make you go, oh yeah, that's going to typical kind of Ole Miss. That's not just a Kiffin thing, but they clearly have that support. They understand how they need to be able to build a roster. And I do think that Ole Miss could kind of internally sell the whole like unfinished business angle more than the casual fan probably realizes for the way that this storybook run is played out. So yeah, if Chambliss comes back, now obviously, TBD on all that. They're hosting this weekend reportedly, On3. All of a sudden, like that news happens, and then, oh, by the way, DJ Lagway, I know he's committed to Baylor, but he's actually taking a visit to Ole Miss this weekend. Oh, Deuce Knight, he's going to Ole Miss this weekend, just seeing what's up. That to me suggests that it is more likely that Chambliss is gone than not. So we'll see what this quarterback situation looks like. But if that world exists and if that 1-2 punch comes back and they're able to keep kind of adding some of these pieces in the portal, yes, I would agree with you. I don't think that's a crazy take at all.
Yeah, and I mean, just really quick on that, it's also not the because odds are he's not coming back, right? Lagway is interesting. I've seen a little bit of Deuce Knight stuff. Oh, but I love that, right? I think that having a little bit of an adjustment year after this year would be kind of perfect for Golding, where obviously you want Chambliss back, but in a world that you don't get him, it's like, well, okay, now let's kind of reload, make this team my own, get these new coordinators in here, because sometimes that number next to your name can be a little bit of a weight on you when you achieved all this stuff last year, but you're still finding your way as a head coach. You're still finding a way with new coordinators. So I think that Ole Miss, look for them to be a scrappy team next year, and then I think for them to compete again in the following year, given that they're going to be able to install everything that Pete Golding wants to bring and that they bring in the system.
Yeah, I'm kind of thrown out the whole like how many starters they returning, blah blah blah. When they were coming in as the team ranked dead last in the SEC in percentage of returning production, it's hard to sit here and pretend like that matters with the way that they construct their rosters. The other takeaway from Ole Miss, who was the last SEC team left, everybody was pointing out that the SEC now 3 consecutive years, no team in the national championship. First time that's happened since the 1999 to 2002 stretch of that. The question people are asking, not really, but maybe we should ask it. Did the SEC curse itself when Greg Sankey got up there at the SEC championship in 2023 and he said, one of these things is not like the other, and he said the Bama deserves to jump Florida State? Is the SEC cursed now because of that?
Maybe so, and as a Cubs fan, how do you break a curse, man?
Whoa.
What do we need to do?
Whoa.
You guys broke the curse. This is a positive.
It's true. Okay. All right. Good. Sorry. Just natural reaction. You spent 26 years of your life, reacting a certain way to something like that. It's just, hits a little bit differently. It's a difficult thing. 3 years versus 108. I don't want to compare the two. I don't want to say that those things are quite equal. Maybe it feels like 108 years that the SEC has been without a team in the national championship. But, this 3-year stretch, it needs to be. If you're still banging the SEC drum and you just want to ignore this 3-year stretch, you've got your head buried in the sand. Like you simply do. And I know we talked about some of this the other day, so I don't want to repeat ourselves too much here. But, since that moment in which Greg Sankey said that and everybody got really mad, the SEC is 3-7 against other conferences in the playoff. Bruce Feldman had it at 3-8, but I don't know why he was counting 2023 Texas, like the loss to Washington, as part of that total. Texas was still in the Big 12. I don't know why he was doing that, because I went back and I looked at the math, and I found that this is a 3-7 mark. And even worse, the 3 playoff wins for the SEC in that 3-year stretch, wherein obviously it didn't have a team in the national championship. 2024 Clemson, 2024 Arizona State, 2025 Tulane. All 3 of those wins were against conference champs who would not have qualified as at-large teams. There's no spin zone for that. You could say that the SEC really doesn't have a marquee victory in the last 3 years in the postseason. The SEC has always been able to flex about its postseason track record, and that is no longer a thing you can spin your way out of. It's just not. And I think last year I said, look, second year that this has happened, I could sell you on the fact that I think Ohio State just kind of, with that much talent, just kind of caught lightning in a bottle at the exact right time, and they went on one of these unbelievable runs. And I could pair that with what I thought was a disappointing season of SEC quarterback play. And so it's probably more so those 2 things than any other. This year, you could point to decorated preseason SEC quarterbacks being underwhelming, but you also had 3 SEC quarterbacks finish in the top 10 of the Heisman voting. So I'm not going to sit here and make that same point. They just weren't the guys that we necessarily expected coming into the year. And I don't think it was just, quarterback play doomed the SEC. I think not having elite teams doomed the SEC. What that 7-page document is going to look like now, it's not conclude anything from this year. 2-8 postseason? No way. There's no way. When Sankey gets up to SEC media days and he brags about the conference, is he going to sound like Jim Phillips and reference like the Dodd preseason watch list? What's he going to bring up? I legitimately don't know.
I can't wait to see what Jim Phillips has to say about this ACC thing.
Jim Phillips,
and you know what's funny?
Jim Phillips and Eric McLean were celebrating that one the 2 hardest, man. They enjoyed, and Danny Cannell, of course. That's an obvious, but they enjoyed that Miami win for everything it was worth.
And you know what's funny? They don't rev share their playoff revenue, so Miami gets all of it, and that's like the best thing in the world for them, because Miami is a wagon and can continue to compete versus giving that to like Bill Belichick to go do whatever he's going to do with it. So a couple of things there, right? And I know we hit on this previously, but okay, again, guys, I'm not Mr. Conference, whatever, but I would argue that going into the postseason, the SEC did have at least one elite team, and it was Georgia. And I think that Ole Miss beating Georgia was a massive moment in program history. Now, again, just because SEC teams are playing SEC teams, do we know that if Trinidad doesn't come back in that game, Georgia doesn't beat Miami? We don't know that, right? So I still think that, just because the big win for an SEC team came against another SEC team who in Georgia, I mean, they've been outside of the Notre Dame game last year pretty spotless and out of conference play, right? Like whenever they've had these big opportunities, they have carried the banner decently well. Now, like I said, when you lose to Ole Miss and you lose to Notre Dame, now you got a bigger issue. But I do think that saying retroactively that we didn't have an elite team in the SEC, I don't think is accurate, because I think that if you would have asked us for 12, 13, 14 weeks, we would have said it was Georgia.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I don't think we will get to remember that because of the way that it played out. And it'd be different if it were in a semifinal game as opposed to a quarterfinal game. That was the only sample size we got of Georgia post SEC championship. So it was a little bit different. If they had one of those quarterfinal games in which they, dominated a team like Oregon or Texas Tech, probably different than just getting there and losing to a team that it had already beat throughout in the regular season. So you're right, and that's something that we talked about. But yeah, I mean, this has just turned into the worst postseason in SEC history. I think that it's going to be really tough for Greg Sankey to talk about all these auto bids when this 3-year pattern exists. And I'm not saying that the SEC is going to have a 25-year stretch with just one program winning a national title like the Big Ten had. But I am saying that I can't set my watch to 3 SEC teams being late season national title contenders. Not at this point. And we'll close on this subject before we, get to what happened in Atlanta. We've got 4 more seasons in the 2020s decade. It remains to be seen what the playoff format's going to be. So all of this is very, very fluid. But I will set the over-under at SEC national titles at 1.5. What would you take?
For which amount of years for the 1.5?
4 years, rest of the decade.
Mhm.
1.5 SEC national titles. Would you take the over or the under?
Golly, man, that's right on it. That's right, because I would literally tell you, you know what? I'm gonna go under, man. I'll be honest. I think about 1 and 4 still wouldn't exactly silence the doubters. Just depends on where it happens. But I think about 1 or 2, and I'm gonna go 1 based on what we're seeing right now.
And nobody would have assumed that when the SEC starts off the decade with 3 consecutive national titles, when they're eating chicken wings on the sideline of 65-7. If you had said, hey, maybe the SEC is only going to win 1 national title in the rest of the 2020s. Like, wait a minute. We just wrapped up the 2022 season. What are you talking about here? The SEC's already had 2 undefeated teams in the decade. In 2021, Georgia was maybe the best defense that we've ever seen. What do you mean? This reign is going to all of a sudden fall off? But that's the world that we're living in. I really think that is a fair thing to now bring up. And for those who have been waiting for a national, I don't want to say national resurgence, but for those who have been wanting more parity, for those who have been wanting the sport to be more national, for those that are opposed to the idea of a super league and all that stuff, this is a positive development for you. I'm not saying it's a positive development for everyone, but there is something to be said for all of the parity that we are seeing play out. And the SEC just simply has not benefited from it from a championship standpoint, at least not yet.
Well, Connor, the sport is just better when Miami's good. So I'm actually pretty happy that we're here. I was sitting on that this whole time. And the question that we need to ask ourselves here is, does the SEC have what it really takes to compete? And that is, they need to get some more Cubans, right? We're seeing the most Cuban national championship in history. We've got we've got Fernando Mendoza, Alberto Mendoza, Mark Cuban, and then on the other side, you got Cristobal, you got the pregame cafecitos. So just like how we had the Wildcat era, now we're having the Cubano era, and we need to get ahead.
How much caffeine is in one of those shots that the Miami players take? And is it all of them or is it just the linemen?
Maybe that's why the DBs are dropping the picks. Maybe they were just seeing double.
Their hands were shaking. I could see it, man. Golly. All right. Let's talk about what happened in Atlanta. Waited 45 minutes to get here. Maybe a little bit more. 56-22. That was incredible. And my lone moment of angst watching this game was the third quarter. I said under my breath to Lauren, getting a little sloppy. Would like this to be a little better. And at that moment, I thought to myself, am I morphing into Kurt Signetti? Is this what it feels like to be this good and to be in pursuit of perfection? Is this what it actually feels like? Because my God, IU was ready from the jump. And I, this is going to sound really cocky. I'm on a few different group texts. Got family, like my cousin who went to IU. I always talk about her. She graduated from IU this past year, and it's like we're texting beforehand and whatnot. And they're like, "Oh, what are you guys seeing for? How does Atlanta look?" Not that I was there or anything like that. My family members weren't there, but what does it look like? The representation's going to be. And I said, based on what it looks like in that stadium, it's at least 80-20. When I turned on the game, 95-5. And who could blame my Oregon fans? Who could blame Oregon fans who had to go to Miami last week and then come back and then go to Atlanta? Like, I don't know how you do that. So that was an IU home game, and it was an IU beatdown in ways that I'm not surprised to see anymore. But I am just blown away, absolutely blown away that this team is so inevitable, Will. So inevitable. Just a belt to what pounding of a
And
team
in
that
a
it had.
season where belt to butt got so out of hand, let's talk about what that means. That is imposing your will at just smoking a team and beating the brakes off of a team. I mean, the amount of checkpoints that Indiana has just gone through. I mean, think about it, not to just dump on Georgia some more, but how long it took Georgia to get over that hump against Alabama. And Signetti just shows up and he's like, yeah, I don't care. He shows up against Oregon. Oh, they've been waiting on the doorstep, waiting on the doorstep. Yeah, I don't care. I'm going to beat the brakes off of them too. I'm so fascinated by this team. I've never seen anything like this.
I've been comparing it to 2010's Bama. That's what it feels like at certain points. There's no doubt about it. But I do think we need to ask the question. I was trying to pinpoint a certain moment in which I had this thought here. And it was, yep, that's right. It was early in, oh no, it was like kind of near the end of the first half. Second quarter, there's 3.5 minutes left. And I'm getting up off of my couch, pointing at the TV like Leonardo DiCaprio, and I'm yelling, "Kill shot, kill shot." It's Fernando Mendoza releasing a perfect ball to Charlie Becker to make it a 3-touchdown game. And I know it's over at that point. And that feeling is something I never thought I would experience watching football at any level. At any level. I truly feel like I am entering a different headspace than I have ever been in. And the question was brought up on the broadcast, and I feel like we have the right audience to ask this question. I realize with me rocking this home field sweatshirt right now, I'm going to come off a certain way. But did it feel at all like 2019 LSU?
I wasn't going to say that, but here's the deal, man. I hate it when people get compared, when players
I
and
do too.
teams get compared
You
to
know I do.
2019 LSU.
Yep.
But okay, I was thinking about that. I'm glad you asked me, like, 'cause I was just clicking this around because every championship has to be compared to this. There's kind of two axes, right? Where, okay, there's the level of competition, and then there is the style points. Okay.
Correct.
So having rooted for 6 championship teams over my life, Saints,
Sick
couple
brag.
LSU, right?
Dang.
Uh right. And the ones that I've seen, right? So women's basketball, 2 baseball, a couple of
Oh, we're
football,
counting everything. Oh, I got
oh
you.
yeah. Saints, like I'm talking about championship teams that I have witnessed. There are some, like women's basketball for LSU, that they were kind of able to avoid Caitlin Clark and some teams like that. There are teams like the Saints who had this insane, level of competition, and they were back and forth games. It was the second. 2019 LSU stands alone as a team that had the road that they had to get there, you know, and they smoked everyone. So for Indiana, it goes, okay, you beat Oregon twice. You beat Ohio State. You go through this road in this year, you
Bama.
beat Alabama. And so I think that in this season, those are the teams you got to worry about. There's not any team that is sitting there that is going, well, we didn't get a shot at them because they beat Ohio State. You know what I'm saying? The defending champion. So I don't think there was ever really a moment. That was the last like close game they had. And Miami, they have dethroned these other teams. They have beaten the teams that, they are the scrappy team that kind of like, how are they still here? So it's going to be a very physical brand of football. So yeah, I think that Indiana satisfies both of those things right now before the championship game, where I'm watching the Oklahoma game is what it felt like with LSU, where it's like,
That's exactly what it felt. I remember being in that building for that semifinal game, and there's laughter in the press box before the end of the first half because LSU is so heads and shoulders above everything Oklahoma was doing, and that's kind of how it felt like with IU. And it's not to say that they brought this up. The star power is obviously different. We're not talking about the first round talent in the same sort of way. I mean, it's very well documented. IU has 8 guys that were 4 or 5-star guys coming out. So I'm not saying from that standpoint it's the same thing, but just when you watch them and just when you watch what they do, how easy it feels, how laughable it feels at times with how dominant they are in all phases of the game and how relentless they are once they get a lead. I haven't felt like this since 2019 LSU. I just haven't.
yeah, I mean, and that's the thing is like, I have said this kind of over the weeks, and people have just been furious at me on the SDS account. But like, I'm not a fan of any of these teams. I can just speak my mind out, whatever. I remember when Signetti beat Alabama the way that they did, and I said, I think he's the best former Saban assistant in the game. And then Georgia fans for 24 hours said, "You're insane, you're insane." Then they played Ole Miss, and again, think about how hard that hurdle was. And then I'm going, hey, the heir to the Bama dynasty, believe it or not, feels like it resides in Bloomington, Indiana, because we were told for all these years that Julius Murderball was impossible in the NIL era. And then we watch Indiana play football and we go, I feel Nick Saban screaming at these players. I see these coordinators going to go on to be head coaches. I see the image of a team that is furious that they're not winning. They're arguing on the sidelines about not winning by more. And we hear every single day about how soft athletes are today and how they just care about money. It's impossible to get guys to stay. And you have a team of grown men in Indiana, and people are mad at that. And it's just like, just because your team can't pull it off, everybody's trying to replicate the Alabama model. We were told that it couldn't be done, but I think that Signetti got out of the building while Saban was still vintage Saban and didn't really adapt to the NIL stuff. Didn't really, and then they have the backing that they have the money for it. But that's what's so crazy to me is just how systemic it is.
First 15-0 team of the 2020s because Georgia ultimately went. Wait, did Georgia go fit? Georgia went 15-0 in 22? Yeah, they did go 15-0 in 22. Okay, second 15-0 team of the 2020s. And it's interesting because Sark brought up the point coming into this year that there's not going to be any more undefeated teams in college football. Going 16-0, forget about it. And all of a sudden you're looking at IU going, well, that very easily now could be a 16-0 team, just like that, with the margin of victory that is even greater than 2019 LSU. It's not to say that they've played all the elite competition, but Lord knows they've faced a lot of the elite competition in different eras. And they have defied logic in ways that people have talked about, will continue to talk about. I get all of that. If they have a different uniform on, we are talking about them in the best teams of the 21st century category. We are. But there will be, all of those things can be quantified if they get the job done against Miami and win a national championship. Because if they don't, Lord knows they will hear about it. But could you imagine what Carson Beck thought as he's watching Dante Moore? Dante Moore, the guy that Oregon wanted more than Carson Beck. You need to remember that. Imagine what he was thinking watching this Indiana defense. And I realized that Dante Moore dealt a kind of a tough hand with the running back situation and just totally decimated the backfield. That fumble
that was
happened.
Also a point that was like kind of one of those things I wanted to look back on, because there was something I saw today that was like, they have one quote unquote fully healthy running. I was like, what does that mean? It's like one guy's sick, one guy's in the portal, one
guy's from DBs coming in,
right? Yeah, and I'm like, this is gonna be important against Indiana. And it kind of was.
Yeah, it really was. But yeah, I mean, shout out to Jamari Jordan, by the way, who tried to shush the Indiana crowd down 27. Really respected that on that touchdown. Meant a lot. Yeah, there are going to be a lot of things said and written about this team, and none of it will do it justice because Signetti just became the first coach to get 26 wins in his first 2 years at a job. I mean,
Just
never
at a
been done.
job, just loose.
Any job, any job in human history, not just FBS football, but no, any job. Yeah, 1936 AP poll, they said, and that's the era that we're talking about here. And he has the most wins through 2 years of any of those coaches. And the job that Fernando Mendoza continues to do, even in spots where you kind of wonder, is he going to make the right decision? He's got 5 incompletions in the playoff. 5. I mean, good luck. Good luck getting that guy out of rhythm. I know everybody's going to be talking about how Miami gets a home game. Fernando Mendoza gets a home game. As he was saying in the post game, he grew up less than a mile from that campus. It's a homecoming for him, too. Just saying. That Mendoza clan, it's going to run deep. I know I saw my guy Trey Wallace. He tweeted out like the get-in price for this game where in Miami it gets a home game at Hard Rock Stadium, and it was $3,100. I still think IU fans will show out. Crazy as that sounds, after what you saw, I don't think all of a sudden IU fans are going to be like, What if you had to guess, Will? What do you think final representation is going to be in that stadium between Miami fans who have been criticized, but they'll show up if you're good? Kind of, I mean, that's what Indiana is. Let's make no mistake about it. What do you think final representation is for a home game for Miami in the national championship?
It's going to be fascinating, man. It really is, because we know that, okay, a lot of my best friends are Miami fans, so I say this lovingly to them.
I always forget that. That's always a weird thing that you bring up of like,
Yeah.
because I don't really get that. We don't really talk like a ton of in-depth Miami stuff, but that to me is like such a wild thing to have to talk about unless it's with people that are from a different generation.
Yeah, and so I have some older friends. My buddy Jeremy, I always talk about in here, is a little bit older. I have some friends younger than me that have seen no success. The thing about Miami is that they get up for big games. That's been like quote unquote the criticism. Like Louisville, they're not getting up for, but the finals,
It's Friday night again.
Those games they often get up for. So I still think though, just and it goes barrier of entry because there's so many more Indiana alums, but the Miami fans are local. So it's how many of these fans can hit this price point. I think per fan, definitely Miami, but I think just the deluge of Indiana fans that have never been there before, I still think you're looking at about 60-40 Indiana.
I wouldn't doubt it. I really wouldn't, man. I would not doubt it at all. I don't know if Falcons games have been that lopsided before. I could not believe how much red there was. Truly. And it's about an 8-hour drive. I've done that drive before. I think I've said that before. I've done that drive from Bloomington to Atlanta. I did that for the Sweet 16 in 2012 when I lost to Kentucky in the Georgia Dome. And I can guarantee you that IU fans will be there in full force. And I'm looking forward to this matchup because I think it favors IU. I really do. And that's a crazy thing for me to sit here and say, and I am not counting my chickens before they hatch, but tell you what, I'd be more scared of Trinidad Chambliss. I would. No, I'm terrified of that Miami defense, though. I am terrified of that Miami defense who might be foaming at the mouth going, well, we didn't get to do our usual thing. And the idea of them coming out and just being that dominant force, certainly on the table, but I don't know. I'm kind of done emotionally hedging with this Indiana team. Why at this point?
Yeah, just just get in there. Yeah, why not, y'all? And the thing is, and this is a point. This is not slander or anything, but Indiana is a fan base kind of similar to Miami, but on the basketball side, where your dad's generation of Indiana fans saw incredible success, and your generation have expected that success, but not exactly got it on the basketball side. So you could talk about that from the Miami side, where these guys have been waiting to spend the money, but I think it's equally true for Indiana, where they have a massive fan base that has been waiting for something to get up for. And so I think that's relevant. And to go back to your point about what are you thinking about the matchup? I literally dropped in the chat with my Miami buddies, and I was like, watching them just smoke Oregon, Indiana. I was like, I guys have a conversation about expectations here. So it's really good that you guys made it this far. I think that this Indiana team, just like I said, feels different. But again, Miami has seen that at every stage of this. They've seen doubters. They've seen same old Miami. I just think that you can't have like we talked about, the football gods against you. You can't leave points on the board or on the sidelines, whatever, like the way they did against Ole Miss against Indiana, and you can't really out physical Indiana in that same way. So yeah, I'm really fascinated by it, especially like this is gonna be an old school game. It's probably gonna be a short game, just based on how much these guys like to control the ball, like on both sides. So yeah, I would predict it to be, and we will predict it. I actually won't give that away yet. Never mind.
I'm predicting an IU win. I'll spoil it. I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care. I think IU's a better team. Lord knows things can happen, but I think IU's a better team. I think IU ends up winning this game. Just so that we won't have fully biased coverage leading up to this, plan is to have Bear Felica on. So Miami grad, IU grad, not a lot of places where you're going to find that. Just saying. So we'll get the full Miami side from this. I was texting with him today, and he's like, enjoy the torture tonight. And I'm looking back at that text going, that third quarter was kind of bad. Other than that, it was sweet, man. Very, very spoiled so far. Golly.
There's nothing better, and this is my comp. It's wild, but just hear me out. This is my comp with like some of the women's basketball stuff or the baseball stuff at LSU, where it's like I go more women's basketball, where it goes. There's this other fan base in like a South Carolina or like Iowa that is so locked in, and you're just happy to be there, and that's like the scariest thing in the world for the other team. When Oregon has all these expectations, and they just keep knocking on the door, and what does Dan Lanning mean, and what does all this stuff mean? And for Indiana, it's just woo, and that's just so terrifying because you have so much more riding on a loss than Indiana does. Like Oregon had so much more riding on a loss than Indiana did a win because they were already there. And yeah, I feel like that's just such a hard thing to combat.
Yeah, should be really good. Go figure, man. Just can't believe that this year started with me thinking that your team was destined to make a national championship, and here we are with my team in it. Doesn't make any sense. But this world, pretty good one to be living in.
Best sport on earth, man.
Best sport on earth, buddy, isn't it? All right, so here's the plan. We will record again on Thursday next week. We're going to have preview for the national championship. At some point coming up here, I promise we will go through everything that happened in the portal. A lot of things that I want to be able to dig into.
It's like almost pointless though, because I look at my phone. I'm gonna get off this podcast, look at my phone, and LSU's gonna have a quarterback, and it's gonna be like me.
I know.
It's like the most shocking development.
So maybe it's a good thing that we've kind of waited more so portal window takeaways. Maybe we should just, we're going to end up waiting until the window closes because we're going to have that pod that we're going to do on Thursday next week. And then after that, the next pod that we do will be after the national championship, where I will try and record that from Miami. And so yeah, we're not going to be talking about the portal for a little bit, so apologies. We're not totally ignoring it. Hey, we brought up DJ Lagway, where he's visiting Ole Miss this weekend. Deuce Knight visiting Ole Miss, but we have a lot of other stuff to get to. I know that many of you have been waiting on that, but national championship is set. Indiana is in it. My God. My God. All right, well, leave us a 5-star review. Subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch every episode of the Saturday Down South podcast. Follow us on Twitter at the SDS Pod, at Seth Down South, at CJ O'Gara, at Ghost Thanks, guys. Talk soon.